We all know the hydrologic cycle. You probably learned about it from some version of this diagram in elementary school. This, however, only talks about the quantity of water, not the quality of that water. Today I want to take you through the journey of an urban raindrop, the fascinating set of physiochemical transformations that occur along the way. I want to tell you the story of Artie. And by the way, I'm going to use AI-generated images throughout my talk as well to give you an idea of the current state of AI and visualization. That being said, this is Artie. He and his billions of friends were just formed in an ominous sky above your city, wrapping around a tiny particle less than a micrometer in size called a cloud condensation nuclei. Artie was born having already been influenced by a very strange group of animals on the ground below that we call humans. This nucleation site that Artie wrapped around could have been dust from the Sahara or salt crystals from ocean spray, but it also could have been soot from a coal-fired power plant or organic aerosols, a downstream byproduct of plant photosynthesis. Artie isn't just a tiny bit of water wrapped around a small particle, however. Oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide gases have already begun dissolving into Artie. Nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide gases released into the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels, they also dissolve into Artie, forming nitric and sulfuric acids, making Artie acidic. Artie's big moment has arrived, though. He's grown so large that he begins to fall out of the cloud that he's called home and towards the ground below. As he falls, he bumps into and absorbs various air pollutants. The sky is often cleanest after a good rain, but that's because Artie collects contaminants along his descent, mainly the byproducts of combustion and many microscopic particles, which are the source of smog. Artie's approaching the ground now. Impact in 3, 2, 1, stop. Let's take a closer look at the surface that Artie is about to smack into. Artie could have landed on the leaf of a tree or a blade of grass, or a pond or a rooftop, and certainly many of Artie's friends did just that. But Artie's luck of the draw has him heading smack dab into a concrete street. Let's enhance. It's not just concrete. The surface is covered in all kinds of debris and contaminants. Oils dropped by vehicles coat the surface. Particulate debris is also prevalent. This comes from many places. Some of it is broken off pieces of pavement, the result of heavy vehicle tires rolling over the surface, ripping off microscopic bits of concrete. Oh, and by the way, those bits of concrete carry with them trace amounts of chromium, a metal toxic to aquatic life that's found as a contaminant within Portland cement, a component of concrete. Let's not forget about those vehicle tires either. You have to replace your tires every so often because the tread wears down. Where does that material go? This is more particulate debris spread over the roadway. This is actually an area where electric vehicles fare worse than gas-powered ones due to their increased weight and therefore tire degradation. Don't get me wrong, electric vehicles fare far better for the environment in most other ways. For example, the decrease in brake dust created due to electric vehicles' regenerative braking. In a traditional gas-powered car, when you hit the brake, every time you hit the brake, tiny bits of your brake pad flake off and land on either your wheels or the ground below. This is a significant source of heavy metals in stormwater. Another significant source is called atmospheric deposition, aka particles that are floating around in the atmosphere and have landed on the pavement surface. These carry with them all kinds of contaminants. One particularly problematic source of atmospheric deposition is exhaust particulates, which contain everything from nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus to heavy metals like cadmium and chromium. There's also things that contribute to surface contamination that you would have thought about before, unlike everything else I've been talking about. Litter on and beside the street, cigarette butts, and plastics contribute. What about all of those places where the pavement has cracked and the concrete has since been sealed? Asphalt and coal tar-based pavement sealants can flake off in stormwater and release something called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, which are harmful to aquatic life. You can also get things like zinc showing up in stormwater from the corrosion of galvanized infrastructure, guardrails, signposts, and metal roofs, for example. Building exteriors in general are significant sources of zinc and other metals like copper, and then other things that you would never think about, like pesticides, which can be added to roofing membranes to prevent plant roots from ever penetrating. All things you would have never thought about. As Artie is joined by his millions of raindrop friends on the surface of the pavement, he forms a puddle and eventually a flowing sheet of water. This sheet collects into a tiny channel, finding the quickest path downhill following the random grooves in the pavement. All of these channels coalesce into a mini raging torrent of water along the curb of the street. Every movement scouring up more and more debris and contaminants from the pavement surface. Artie has already undergone a massive transformation. Starting as a humble little raindrop of pure water with some dissolved gases, Artie is now absolutely filthy. He's full of suspended solids, metals, and organics. Artie's pH, a measure of how acidic or basic he is, has risen significantly, from acidic to neutral or even basic. This is from the concrete particles interacting with the water, releasing bases into it. A lot of the contaminants that were bound up on the surface of particles in the water have since dissolved into the water itself, free from the granular vehicle that had been carrying them so far. This is an important point, that some of the pollutants are bound up on the surface of particles that are suspended in the water, while others are free-floating, dissolved in the water itself. The fate of these two categories of pollutants differs greatly. Artie finds himself now falling once again, this time through a grate in the pavement into the abyss of what's called a catch basin below. Artie is entering a network of underground pipes that we call storm sewers. This first drop into the catch basin is likely the end of the road for much of the large litter, twigs, water bottles, and pebbles, the like. The rest of the contaminants and debris will continue down the storm sewer system, following the flow of water. This particular storm sewer system has a passive water treatment device called a hydrodynamic separator. This is a device that employs gravity to remove some contaminants from water by taking advantage of their different densities. In short, heavy stuff sinks and light stuff floats. So oils, which are less dense than water, will float to the surface and get stuck by a baffle that prevents water and oil from leaving that top zone of the hydrodynamic separator. Particles, which are more dense than water, will sink to the bottom and get stuck. The larger the particle, the faster it will fall. So the water leaving the hydrodynamic separator still has many small particles, but most of the larger ones have been removed. Crucially, all of those dissolved contaminants free-floating in the water, they'll pass straight through this type of treatment device, not getting removed at all. Note something about this system, that it requires regular maintenance. A vacuum truck has to come by every so often and suck out the oils and sediment that's accumulated over the many storms that have passed through since the last cleaning. Maintenance of stormwater infrastructure is absolutely critical, but in tight city budgets and potentially lax regulatory enforcement, this crucial step can often go overlooked. If not done often enough, the system fails to treat the water effectively because it's starting to fill up with sediment. Or worse, previously deposited material can leach out of the water, of the sediment, and back into the water, making it dirtier than when it entered in the first place. Having left the hydrodynamic separator, Artie is free to slip and slide his way down the rest of the storm sewer network until eventually spotting daylight. Artie's underground portion of the trip is over, and he discharges out into a creek. A picture of my backyard, by the way. This creek may look more like a raging river right now, albeit a small one. And that's because all of Artie's friends are quickly making their way downstream. As they go, this rush of torrent erodes away the natural soils of the creek, adding particulate to Artie and everything that particulate carries with it. This makes Artie more filthy again, erodes away the creek bed, and causes downstream headaches whenever some of that suspended sediment eventually falls back out of the water whenever it becomes more calm and still. Artie will continue flowing downstream through larger and larger creeks, eventually hitting a river, and ultimately the ocean. Artie's trip could have looked very different if he had landed on some other piece of land or at a different point in time. Smacking into asphalt instead of concrete pavement changes the chemistry of that first 10 yards of the journey significantly. Artie could have landed somewhere that implements detention ponds or green infrastructure, which would completely change the biophysiochemical transformation that he underwent in the storm sewer network. Or he could have landed in the winter, and with the potential presence of vast quantities of de-icing salts, which would fundamentally change his water chemistry. Artie also could have landed in a city that uses street sweepers to significantly reduce the surface contamination that made Artie so dirty in the first place. Every raindrop has a unique experience on its journey. Let's take a moment to reflect on one key aspect of Artie's journey, that every part of it was impacted by human decisions. How we build and operate our cities, what policies and regulations we have in place, impacts Artie's journey greatly. This is perhaps easiest to see in the areas for which we've already made major progress or has been largely resolved. We no longer see the massive quantities of lead in stormwater that we used to because we decided to place a ban on leaded gasoline. We've seen many states place bans on the use of coal tar-based pavement sealants because of the known harm that they cause aquatic life. We've seen progress in phasing copper out of brake pads, and as we continue to reduce air pollution, stormwater also gets cleaner. We as a society make choices about our impact on the environment. One nice facet of this is that improvements designed to reduce one set of impacts may be helpful in other ways too. These are positive, unintended consequences, and our transition to a sustainable society will be full of these. We can get there, even if we focus on one humble little raindrop at a time. Thank you.